So today I want to go over an overview for the Druid class in Diablo 4. So the Druid's going to be the shape-shifting class of Diablo 4, being able to shapeshift into werebears and werewolves. But this doesn't mean they're only going to be focused on shape-shifting, because they're also going to have a pretty big focus on earth and lightning spells, meaning that they're also going to have quite a lot of builds that have no shape-shifting and are focused on being this elemental caster. Now the Druid's main resource is going to be Spirit, and this works a little bit differently than all the other main resources because you only gain this resource when using an ability that generates spirit, but you don't lose any spirit over time. So if you compared it to something like the Barbarian's Fury, the Barbarian mainly generates Fury by using Fury generating abilities, but when they're out of combat, they'll be losing this Fury over time. With Spirit, you don't lose it at all. Now the Druid's unique class mechanic is going to be the Spirit Animal system. Now how this works is once you get into Skazgulin, you can start bonding with these different animal spirits that will give you different buffs. Now how this is going to work is there's going to be 4 spirit animals: the deer, the eagle, the wolf, and the snake. All 4 of these spirit animals have 4 different options of buffs you can get from them. And to get these buffs and bond with these spirit animals, you're going to be giving them these items you get just from doing content out in the world. Killing enemies can drop them, you can get them from quests. Pretty much doing any content can give you these items that you give to the spirit animals to be able to bond with them. Now it seems like this is probably going to be some progression bar or progression system where you have to give them enough of these items and then you get to bond with them. Now once you first start off, you're only going to be able to bond with one of these spirit animals, but as you progress more and more, you'll be able to start to get more and more buffs. And once you're fully completed with this system, you're going to be able to have 5 total buffs. So you're going to be able to bond with 3 of the spirit animals and choose one of their 4 buffs, and then you're going to be able to specialize into the last spirit animal, getting yourself 2 of their 4 buffs, giving you 5 total. And you can change what buffs you want at any time. And these buffs are very strong, but a bit boring. So for instance, on the deer, you could choose between thorns, maximum spirit, take reduced damage from elites, or reduce crowd control effects on yourself. But then from the eagle, you have 5% increased crit chance, increase to maximum life, increase to attack speed, or increase to critical strike damage. So each one of these spirit animals kind of give you a similar range of buffs, either to defensives, offensives, and one of them is even kind of focused on lucky hit. So I do think this is the most boring of the unique class mechanic for any of the classes, but this may end up being one of the strongest just because you can get 5 buffs and a lot of these buffs are very strong. So just like all the other classes of Diablo 4, the Druid skills are going to be split into 6 different categories. You have a basic, core, defensive, companion, wrath, and ultimate. And again, you can mix and match any skills of all the first 5 categories. So you could use 4 basic skills if you wanted to, but once you get to ultimate, you can only use 1 ultimate skill at a time. So first off, we have basic skills, and these are going to be very important for basically every Druid build because this is going to be the main way you go about generating spirit. And like we went over with your spirit resource, generating spirit is going to be very important because you're going to overall have less ways to generate it, and you're going to generate less because it doesn't drain over time. And an example of a basic skill is Claw. Now this is going to be a skill that transforms you into a werewolf, and this generates 9 spirit, lucky at chance of 52%. You shapeshift into a werewolf and claw at the enemy. Now when shapeshifting as a druid, it's going to be completely seamless. You don't have to shapeshift then use your ability. Use your ability, it automatically shapeshifts. There's no like animation locking or weird clunky mechanic. It's all very smooth, and then a couple seconds after using a shapeshifting skill, it'll automatically shapeshift you back into your human form unless you continue to use shapeshifted skills. And an example of an upgrade is Claw's attack speed is increased by 10%, so a very basic upgrade. And next up we have core skills, and these are exactly what you think they would be. These are going to be some of your main used skills that have a spirit cost. They're going to be doing a lot more damage, and in most builds these are going to be your main damaging skills that you focus a lot of your gear and effects around. And an example of this is Tornado, which is a storm skill Spear costs a 40, lucky hit chance of 34%. You conjure a swirling tornado that deals damage. And an upgrade of this is each time you cast Tornado, you have a 20% chance to spawn an additional tornado. Now this particular skill wasn't very strong in the last betas. I'm pretty sure it did get a buff, but I also think that with a lot of the effects in the game, some of the uniques, and some of the upgrades you can get for this, I think Tornado in the end game is going to be very strong, and I do think there's going to be some builds completely built around this ability. And it's just a really cool ability anyway. And next up we have the defensive category, which is either going to be a defensive skill to make you tankier or some type of utility to try to keep you alive longer. And an example is Cyclone Armor. Has an 18-second cooldown, lucky hit chance of 26%, and its passive is powerful when surround you, granting 20% non-physical damage reduction, so damage reduction to everything but physical damage, so all the different elements. And then the active is the winds rapidly expand, knocking back enemies and dealing damage. For basic, this is going to be a very good defensive for basically any build. And then the active is also going to be very good for casters to try to keep enemies away from you. And an upgrade of this is enemies who are knocked back by Cyclone Armor are slowed by 70% for 1.5 seconds. Now that is a massive slow. This is going to be very good for PvE because if you want to knock something back, you probably don't want to be near them for a while, and a 70% slow, even if it's just for 1.5 seconds, is going to be massive at keeping enemies off of you. And next up we have the companion category, which is going to allow you to summon different creatures to help you in combat or give you different buffs. And this category is either going to be some good filler spells that do additional damage or give you some additional buffs, or there's the possibility of having some builds that use all of these companion skills, which will potentially allow you to have a Druid pet build. Now specifically the companion category for the Druid got some massive buffs after the first public betas, so I think these are going to be very strong on launch. And an example is Wolf's. Has a 14-second cooldown, lucky hit chance of 52%. You summon 2 wolf companions that bite enemies for damage. That's the passive, so you're just always going to have these wolves with you. But the active is you direct your wolves to focus an enemy, leaping to them, doing a much bigger chunk of damage. And again, these numbers are old and these have been massively buffed. And an upgrade is wolves deal 20% increased damage to immobilize, stunned, slowed, or poisoned enemies. So if you have pretty much any CC or poison on enemies, your wolves are just going to be doing a lot more damage. And next up we have the Wrath category, and this category is going to house either big damaging skills on a long cooldown or some type of very useful utility on a long cooldown. So an example is Hurricane, 20-second cooldown, lucky hit chance of 35%. Form a hurricane around you that deals really big damage to surrounding enemies over 8 seconds, and this doesn't have a spirit cost. So this whole category is going to be more filler spells. They're all going to have a decently long cooldown, so they're not going to be spammable parts of your build, but a lot of the skills in this category are very strong. And an example of an upgrade is enemies who are damaged by a hurricane are slowed by 25% for 2 seconds, and so it's just going to be very good for kiting or keeping on enemies. And we've already gone over some synergies we have with different forms of CC, which this is just going to be constantly applying. And even though this is just a pure damaging skill, some of the other skills in this category aren't based on pure damage. For example, another one of the Wrath skills is just a big heal for your werewolf shapeshift. And finally, we have the ultimate category. These are going to be very long cooldown, very strong abilities, but you're only going to be able to choose and use one of these at a time. And just like the companion category, all of the ultimates for Druid got some pretty big buffs after the first public beta. So an example is Grizzly Rage, which is a werebear shapeshift, has a cooldown of 60 seconds at a baseline, shapeshift into a dire werebear for 10 seconds, gaining 20% bonus damage and 20% damage reduction. Damage bonus is increased by 3% each second while in this form. Kills extend the duration by 1 second up to 10 additional seconds. So with this, you're just shapeshifting into a werebear. This would obviously be used with a werebear build. You just get massive bonus damage and damage reduction buffs, and the damage buff keeps stacking the longer you're in this form. And there's probably going to be some legendary or unique effects that allow you to stay in Grizzly Rage much longer. This is going to be a very strong ultimate for werebear builds, and especially if you're killing a lot of enemies, you're going to be able to keep increasing that duration to keep stacking up your damage even more. And an upgrade for this is you are now unstoppable while Grizzly Rage is active. That means you can't be CC'd at all. And that's also going to be very strong for PvP. Anything that makes you unstoppable is ridiculous in PvP. Now there is one more category at the end of the skill tree that doesn't house any active skills, but you are able to choose one very strong capstone passive. And these are 1-point passives. You can only choose one out of this category at a time. And an example is Perfect Storm. Your storm skills grant 2 spirit and deal 20% increased damage while damaging a vulnerable, immobilized, or slowed enemies. And you're obviously going to be wanting to use this with a full storm build. And as we went over, some of these storm skills actually have some of the CC built into their upgrades. So you're going to want enemies to always have one of these forms of CC on them to constantly be getting this 20% increased damage. And then this is also going to help you generate much more spirit to just cast your big storm skills more often. So once you get into the end game, you're going to start progressing your Paragon boards. And one of the most important part of the Paragon boards are going to be their legendary nodes. And every Paragon board past your first is going to have one of these legendary nodes, and the board's also going to share the same name. And this is the main thing I want to go over with the Paragon boards, because there's so much information you could go over with the system when talking about a specific class, but I think these legendary nodes give you a good idea of the different Paragon boards and where they're headed. So first off, we have Ancestral Guidance. After spending 75 spirit, you deal 30% increased damage for 5 seconds. So it's going to be very good for any build that generates a lot of spirit and uses that spirit very quickly. Next up, we have Constricting Tendrils. It's a lucky hit effect. Nature and magic skills have up to a 15% chance to entangle an enemy with vines, immobilizing them for 2 seconds and poisoning them for 120% of your base damage over 4 seconds. So this is going to be an effect you want if you're getting a lot of lucky hit chance, and this is going to be a very strong effect. And immobilize for 2 seconds already pretty strong, but then poisoning them for this much damage over 4 seconds is quite a lot of damage, and poison is also going to synergize with a lot of other Druid skills. Then we have Earthen Devastation. Your Earth skills deal 30% increased damage to enemies afflicted by crowd control. So this is just any crowd control, slow, immobilize, stun, anything, you deal 30% more damage with Earth skills, and a lot of the Earth skills actually have some form of crowd control in them as well. So you're just going to be doing a lot more damage with an Earth build taking this node. Then we have Heightened Malice. When there are 3 or more poisoned enemies nearby, you deal 45% increased damage. Now I know we didn't go over a lot of skills that had poison on them, but there are a lot of Druid skills that either apply poison themselves or that have upgrades to apply poison. Even some of the basic skills have upgrades to make them apply poison on hit, and we just went over another node that can apply poison on lucky hit, so using this with any poison build going to be incredibly strong. Then next up we have Inner Beast. After shapeshifting, your spirit costs are reduced by 10% for 5 seconds up to 30%. So this is going to be very good for a build where you're constantly shapeshifting. Maybe there's going to be a build where you have some spellcast, maybe some Earth spellcast, then you have a skill that shapeshifts you into a werebear, then you have a skill that shapeshifts you into a werewolf. Because most likely once you get into the end game, you'll have the possibility of keeping this effect stacked up 100% of the time, which could just allow you to have 30% cost reduction for all spirit spenders. And next up we have Lust for Carnage. Critical strikes with werewolf skills restore 2 spirit. This is going to be incredibly strong for any werewolf build, and actually I have looked at some of the uniques and I went over this in another video, but there is a unique skill that turns all storm skills into werewolf skills, so there's going to be some ridiculous builds mixed in with this into the end game. Then we have Survival Instincts. While in werebear form, you deal 1% increased damage up to 50% for every 1% difference in current life percent between you and your enemy. So I'm not sure how this is actually going to work, if it's going to work in both ways. So maybe you're against an enemy that's 100% health and you have 50%, is that going to give you the damage boost? And if you're 100% and the enemy you're facing is 50%, would that also give you the damage boost? I'm assuming yes, but just in general, this can be a very strong effect if you're basing your gameplay around getting the most out of this effect. I think this effect sounds kind of basic, but I think it's actually going to take quite a lot of gameplay and knowledge to consistently get the most out of this. Then finally, we have Thunderstruck. Storm skills deal 30% increased critical strike damage against vulnerable or immobilized enemies. So if you're using a storm build and you use this, you're going to want to have a lot of vulnerable or immobilized effects. And this is also going to be for a storm critical strike focused build. So I'm not sure how strong this is actually going to be. It honestly seems like one of the weaker legendary nodes for the Druid. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.